Hi, my name is David Edward Garber, and I'm running for Orem City Council. Well, I grew up in Northern Virginia during the Reagan administration and into the Cold War, and I think I learned a lot growing up to appreciate America's heritage and from my schooling and from other experiences, and I just learned a great appreciation for our nation's founders and for the wonderful political system that they gave to us. And I'm definitely was very interested in learning more about that. I remember in 1987 when my church's leaders talked about our inspired Constitution in a conference, and it had a great effect on me. I started seeking out more to learn more about constitutional principles and libertarian principles, the principles on which our government was founded, and learned a lot. And I just loved what I learned and ate it up, and I'm very interested in trying to preserve that. And I wasn't all that active in politics for a long time. I was in college Republicans and other things. I didn't get significantly active until 2008 when I started getting really fed up with our president at the time, George Bush. He was Republican. I voted for him. I was so excited he was going to continue the Reagan Revolution. And then after several years, I started realizing he just wasn't giving me any of the things I wanted, none of the things that drew me to the Republican Party in the first place. So I decided that I was just going to, I decided to support Ron Paul instead, and I became very active in politics at that time, trying to promote what I believe were better candidates, and I learned a lot about local and state politics and how they worked, and I've been very active in those since then. I've been a delegate at times to county and state conventions, and I've attended them at least as an activist on many occasions, and I've just been very interested in following what's going on in politics and just trying to do what I can to make a difference from the outside. And I just felt like the time had come for me to try to make a difference from the inside too. Well, my top priority would be defending the rights of the people. I think people are best when they're free, and I just love freedom, and I love seeing other people free, and I just think people are the best when they're not being compelled by their neighbors or by some centralized authority. And so my primary duty, I feel, as a city council person would be to make sure that people remain free, that their rights to their person, their property, to over their children, to contract and defense, those things are defended effectively. And so that would be first and foremost what I'd like to do, and just to alleviate any government burdens that stand in the way of that. So, for example, things like zoning. I know a lot of people are concerned that there's a lot of effort to impose these high-density housing cores in our city, served by mass transit that's heavily subsidized by the state. And as for myself, I think a lot of the incentive for high-density housing is that we're having a housing crisis right now. Housing prices across the nation are exceptionally expensive, especially in places like California where they're very highly regulated. And I would love to see less regulation. I think zoning is something that's become so commonplace we don't question it anymore, but we should. In places like Houston have grown up with hardly any, and they have some of the most affordable housing in the nation. If we had less of that, less heavy-handed centralized control over land use, I think we'd have a lot more affordable housing, and people wouldn't be in such demand to move in these high-density centers. So really, that's the direction I think that we should be going, is less burden from the government and just more freedom. Well, I think one of Orem's biggest strengths is the character of the people, which is what drew me to Orem in the first place. I grew up in Northern Virginia. I came here to go to school at BYU, and I just love this area. I love this part of the United States. The people here are just relatively open and friendly, and volunteerism is high, charitable donation is high. We have some of the greatest income equality in the entire United States, and I think it's all because people here have really good character. And I think people, like I said, are their best when they're free and virtuous. And we got such wonderful people here. I just love more freedom. I think we would have, our society would thrive even more here if people had less, less burden on them from the city government and from all levels of government. And I would just love to see more of that. We also have great strengths in like the high-tech sector, healthcare. We have a great education here. I mean, we have 2 huge universities close by. UVU right here in town. So a lot of people who work there, and I would just love to see. I'd love to help bring out those strengths more by just having less regulation, less centralized control. Still defend people's rights, of course. That is my top priority. But I worry about sometimes, as I say, it goes beyond simply defending rights and starts trying to have some centralized top-down control over society. And that's not what I want. I want to be going the opposite direction instead. I think really the biggest issues are always kind of timeless universal issues of whether we have heavy-handed top-down government that rules over us and tries to run our lives, or whether we have government that stands as our servant and helps keep us free so that we can freely plan our own lives and make our own plans and implement them. And I think people work best when they're free. And I think all the issues that we face are really just details of that. Some issues that particularly stand out to me in recent years are of course, the zoning, which I talked about a little bit earlier. I know there's also some concerns recently about the splitting the Alpine School District, which I understand is inevitable. They're going to be doing it eventually anyway. It's just a matter of timing. So I know the City Council last year was very interested in doing that right away, but I know the voters spoke against that. So I definitely want to respect the people's wishes on that. But yeah, I think those are 2 very prominent recent issues that I've noticed. As for other issues, I would just, in general, like less licensing, less regulation. I think markets work a lot better with private sector solutions than public sector ones in general. So things like, I know I talk a lot about this more on detail on my website, so I don't want to go into too much detail here. But really, I just think the city should focus first and foremost on making sure people's rights are defended. Our police are being as effective as possible at defending rights within the limits of course, due process of law and such. And yet, at the same time, anything beyond that, I think is better to head in the direction of more freedom. Can't think of much. I just love liberty, and I just want other people to enjoy it too. And I've looked forward to being a voice of conscience on the City Council. People have told me ever since my childhood I've been very conscientious, and I think there are certain timeless, universal moral principles that apply to everything in life, including politics, including the use of force on other people. I think that use is very limited sparing. I think we should use it as a last resort in defense. I think it's justified in those cases, but I don't think it should be used as a first resort for everything under the sun. So I just want to help defend rights and otherwise allow people the freedom. And if that's what you like to, then please consider voting for me.